This is our pro-law enforcement administration putting a guy who was talking about killing cops in a senior advisory role for the Department of Justice? Are you kidding me? I can't believe this is real. I am so irritated and frustrated about what is happening at the FBI, about FBI officials now getting fired for having worked on the January 6th cases, or now we see an FBI official who was the acting director of the FBI getting pushed out because he wouldn't provide all the names of the people who worked on January 6th cases. Don't tell me you're pro-law enforcement when you're treating our law enforcement officials this way. Putting him aside, there have been dozens of people at the FBI who have been fired now or pushed out because they were involved in the January 6th cases. Most of them were assigned to work on those cases. That's what happens when you work in law enforcement. You get assigned to work on a case. The fact that they're firing, pushing out these people who got assigned to work on a case is about as anti-law enforcement as you can be. You want to start firing law enforcement officials for cases they were assigned to? Not that they did anything wrong in how they investigated them. Cops were beat up. What the heck are we doing? Speaking of cops getting beat up, one of the January 6th defendants, named Jared Wise, who faced 6 charges, is now a senior advisor to the Department of Justice. On Thursday, video was released that showed this guy, Jared Wise, who used to work at the FBI, at January 6th, yelling, "You guys are disgusting. I'm former law enforcement. You're disgusting. You're the Nazi. You're the Gestapo. You can't see it. Shame on you. Shame on you." He goes on to say, "Yeah, F them. Yeah, kill them. Kill him, kill him, kill him." This is a guy who's now serving as an advisor to the Department of Justice. A Justice Department spokesperson said in a statement that Wise is a valued member of the Department of Justice and we appreciate his contributions to our team. This guy was one of the luckiest guys out there, by the way, because he was charged with 6 counts. The trial was set to begin in the fall, was ultimately held in January. But before the jury could begin deliberating, Trump issued the pardons. This is our pro-law enforcement administration? Putting a guy who was talking about killing cops in a senior advisory role for the Department of Justice? Are you kidding me? I can't believe this is real. Last night I spoke to a high-level, well-connected person in MAGA world. I was trying to understand, how could this be? He basically said to me, "I want to just tell you, I don't even think the administration knew about this." It's like, yeah, okay. This has to be taken in connection with the ouster of more of these FBI officials, all right? 2 more were announced yesterday. Brian Driscoll, who led the Bureau weeks after Trump's inauguration. The other one is Stephen Jensen, who had been the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office, one of the busiest there. This is part of a broader purge at the FBI. I have to tell you, I said this, but I am a little less concerned with the senior people than I am all of the support staff who are getting fired, who worked on the January 6th cases. I'm not going to let them rewrite history on January 6th. I'm just not. I am also one of those people who said that I did not think that people who walked into the Capitol building and walked out should have had the book thrown at them. I will also point out that there were a lot of people who technically violated the law in terms of where they were at the Capitol who were not charged. Thousands who were in the circle which would be considered part of the Capitol premises where they weren't allowed to be. But the only ones who ended up getting charged were the ones who actually went into the building. Okay. But I'll go a step further and say if you walked into the building, with the crowd, you walk out a minute later, I have no problem with those people getting pardoned. But let's not pretend as if cops weren't assaulted that day. Let's not pretend as if this was a peaceful protest. If this administration had carefully gone through each and every January 6th defendant and ensured that the worst of them were not pardoned or granted clemency, I would be a lot less pissed off. But the reason I'm talking about it again today is because now they're trying to purge anyone at the FBI who was involved in prosecuting even the most righteous of the cases there. And that's a problem. I think I had the name wrong. It was Driscoll, who was the acting director to replace Chris Wray, while Kash Patel's nomination was pending. And it was Driscoll and a then deputy director, Robert Kissane, who resisted demands for a list of agents who participated in the investigations into January 6th. Why did they resist it? Because they knew what was coming. They were trying to protect their employees. And you have the FBI's union now speaking out against this and saying that they are very concerned about what's been happening. This is a law enforcement union. I only say that to say that this claim that, oh, we're pro-police, we're pro-law enforcement. You're selectively pro-law enforcement. I said that last night on CNN. Doesn't mean the administration is anti-law enforcement across the board, but it means this is certainly an indication of being anti-law enforcement, and in my view, it's appalling. The FBI deserves better. People who commit themselves to law enforcement deserve better. And we need to not allow this administration to whitewash what happened on January 6th. Now, pointing the fingers about who was to blame ultimately for it happening, how much blame does Trump deserve, all of that, okay. But the people engaging in property damage and the people who are beating up cops ought to be behind bars, and more importantly, or just as importantly, the people who were putting them behind bars, the people who were investigating that, shouldn't be punished for it. It's not complicated. It's just so weird being one of the few intellectually consistent pro-law enforcement people out there. You know, look, I think most of you know I host a live police show called On Patrol Live, which is on the Reelz channel, Reelz. It's also on Peacock. Every Friday and Saturday night from 9 to midnight, I am following police officers and police departments around the country live. And I'll admit it, that having done this, and I've been doing some form of a live police show now for probably 7 years, it has definitely enhanced my respect for police. Do I see things that police are doing wrong? Yeah. Do the cops who are in studio with me notice protocol violations? Absolutely. It's a hard job. It's a hard job whether you're local police or you're in the FBI. And I get it that there are a lot of local police who are not big fans of the FBI. It is all law enforcement. And here, let me play you, I haven't heard this myself, but Senator Mark Warner was on CBS Face the Nation talking about the FBI firings. This is number 5.
Well, if you are suddenly taking out the most experienced folks at Justice or at the FBI, how does that make us stronger? And what he's saying is every FBI agent that somehow touched the January 6th investigation, that was a comprehensive investigation. I've been told there were almost half of all the FBI agents at least had some involvement. Remember, this was a case that was taken up against these rioters all across the country. If you're suddenly going to get rid of all of those, that could be thousands.
Yeah.
What does that mean for our cybersecurity? What does it mean for our trafficking and stop against fentanyl and other drugs? What does it mean in terms of, serious crime investigations? This would be devastating.
He raises a good point, which is it isn't just wrong. It's also bad for the country. It's bad for law enforcement. And to those who say, well, if they're allowed to do it. Okay. Just because you're allowed to do it doesn't mean that you should do it. If we're going to be a country where anything you're allowed to do becomes okay, then we're in big trouble. I would assume a White House official or the president could decide to pee on the White House lawn. Probably allowed to do it, right? They shouldn't do it.
Well, I wrote a letter to Director Patel of the FBI, and I asked him to look into the matter, and he responded to me directly, saying that he had assigned agents in both the San Antonio and Austin office to meet my request. My concern, Mark, is that number one, we've got these runaway state reps up in Chicago and Boston, so obviously across Texas state lines. So means that you need the federal government to look into interstate matters like this.
That is Senator John Cornyn on the Mark Davis show this week, explaining why he asked the FBI to get involved in rounding up the Democratic state legislators from Texas who have fled the state to avoid giving them a quorum. And let me explain to you how insane that is, okay? So Texas authorities are allowed to arrest and return the legislators. It's not a crime. It's a civil arrest, meaning they're arresting them not to take them to jail, but to take them to work. Right? So the sergeant at arms of the state legislature is empowered to do it, and they can ask that state law enforcement also help. What Senator Cornyn is saying is since they've crossed state lines, you have to ask for the FBI's help. Except this is a civil arrest. The FBI should not be getting involved in civil arrests. Eventually, they're going to have to return, and I think that there's actually, there may be some news happening. I'm going to make sure I'm not behind the curve on this, and make sure that there's nothing new on this. But there was a proceeding held today in the State House, and I want to make sure that I'm certain that they didn't get a quorum. Yeah, it was 10 minutes ago. Yeah, Texas House fails to reach a quorum as the redistricting continues. The redistricting standoff continues. And in 2021, the Texas Supreme Court actually addressed this question. And they said the Democrats are allowed to do it. And the Republicans are allowed to try to get them back. But by using state authorities. Now you have the governor and the attorney general literally stepping over each other to try to be the ones to argue that they've abandoned their positions. Now, it's a interesting moral argument. It's just one that the Texas Supreme Court has already rejected. Is it possible they'll reverse themselves knowing the political pressure? I guess it's possible. But it sure would be intellectually inconsistent with a ruling that they issued in 2021 on the very same question. But the FBI? Come on. So that was Cornyn. And this is J.B. Pritzker making, I think, actually a similar point. He's basically protecting a bunch of these folks. This will be, let's try number 18 with J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois.
The fact is that neither Texas nor the FBI at the federal level have the ability to arrest these Texas Democrats who are breaking quorum. They just don't. There is no legal precedent for that. There's no law on the books that would allow them to do that.
I don't think he's right with regard to the Texas authorities. I think he's right with regard to the FBI. But again, it doesn't mean arresting them and taking them to jail. It means arresting them and bringing them back. But I am curious what all of you think about this. I mean, look, this redistricting thing is going to become such a mess. The position we're going to take now is we're going to go all out, right? We're not going to actually even try to hide what we're doing with the gerrymandering. We're just going to do pure political plays We'll take as many seats as we can. I mean, one of the most insane and inane things that has been said is President Trump said, well, based on the results in 2024, we have to do this. And I challenged last night on CNN Scott Jennings and a conservative radio host. I said, what is it exactly about 2024 that somehow authorizes mid-decade redistricting? They don't have an answer.